Well, good morning, church. Thank you for joining us for our Daily Devo. This is covering this day, the crucifixion of Christ. And Luke is different than the other Gospels. The other Gospels are all written on the account of one person. Matthew telling his story, John his story, Mark telling the story that would have come from Peter. But Luke says at the beginning, I researched these things. I put them all together. It's the most chronological of all the Gospels. It has the most detail, Luke being a Gospel. And even in this section, we see some things unique to Luke. First, we see a couple symbolic things he talks about. He talks about a darkness covering the whole land. And to me, that's that picture of the darkness, the morning of Christ's death, but also the darkness of sin that's there, that's all being placed upon Christ. The sin of the world, all the sin that has existed, that's going to or will be existed is being placed on him. And then we hear where Luke tells us about the temple that separated that place from the Holy of Holies to the other part of the temple, that it's tore from top to bottom, something only God could do. And remember that you weren't allowed to go in that area unless you were a high priest. And you can imagine when it tears, they're told, you don't even look at that. You don't go there. I'm imagining priests kind of covering their faces, thinking it's going to be an Indiana Jones moment to them. They're going to die, and they don't. You know why? Because no longer does there have to be sacrifice for sin by animals to cover sin, because the sacrifice of Jesus' death, his blood, would take away, not cover, take away the sin of the world. We see in this section the willingness that Jesus commends his spirit to God, that his life isn't being taken, it's being given freely by him for our sins. We see a third thing. We see the Roman centurion who looks at Christ and seeing everything that's happened, he states, surely this was a righteous man, and he praises God. And then that last of the uniques is that we see the people there that once they've seen him die and they've seen this spectacle before, but everything that's happened, they mourn, I think, realizing what had happened, that this truly was the Son of God. And then there's something in this last part of the chapter that's in all four Gospels. Remember, it's unique to find something in all four Gospels. All four Gospels don't talk about the birth of Christ. There's so many events that only are talked about by one or two or even three of the Gospels. But all four of the Gospels tell us about the burial of Christ. I think they did that because they wanted everyone to know that this was his death, that he literally died for our sins. But what do we know? We know he died, but he doesn't stay in that grave. His disciples are crushed. They're confused. They don't know what's going to happen, but we do, because Easter is coming. He had to die for our sins, but he had to be resurrected to show he was God, to show he had the power not only over sin, but over death. It is the hope that we have. And so, I want to encourage you guys this weekend. Most of you're in the Huntsville area, join us for one of our services. If you're somewhere else, maybe you've joined our Devo, and if so, go to a church where you are. But it's going to be amazing that as the sun rises, from the east to the west, there'll be Christians all across the world together celebrating the resurrection of Christ. The victory that Christ had over sin and death, that gives us hope in this life, but even more in the life to come. Guys, looking forward to seeing this weekend. Thank you for joining us for our Daily Devo.